Quarterlies, as mentioned, I've been in the construction industry my whole career. Just became a grandfather, so don't do all that arithmetic right there. I already know I'm pretty old. But my 4 years in tech with Primavera was a fantastic experience for me because it really plugged me into the whole global construction economy. And now I've been with Dodge for 18 years, where we focus on the construction economy, and I lead our research group, where we do focused research on not just the economy, but also technology and project delivery trends and all the kinds of things that are happening all over the world in this industry. We publish these free reports to inform the industry on the kinds of things that are happening. There's the URL for this. These are all free, so there's probably 50, 60 of these things up there right now. All kinds of different topics: technology, economics of business, everything that's happening in terms of practices and project delivery processes and things. So please take advantage of these as a free industry resource. What I'm going to cut through today is I'll give you some highlight sense of our construction forecast here at Dodge. I'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into what we think is going to be happening with the infrastructure bill. Then I'll share with you some of what we're learning in our quarterly surveys about the business health of construction companies, both commercial and civil. Give you a summary, then share with you briefly some of the upcoming research reports that we have in progress right now that will be coming out in the coming months, and then we'll have time for questions. So please use that chat box anywhere along the way, toss questions in there, and Annalisa will moderate those for us at the end. So in terms of the construction forecast, we track projects from the point that they're a twinkle in the eye of an owner all the way through to the point that they're completed construction. In terms of our economic forecasting, we tend to work with what's known as starts. Those of you on the design side of things, you know, an awful lot of projects never reach start. Great ideas, they just never really get off the ground. So we really like the idea of the start, right? They break ground, the money's there, they're gonna do the project. Unless it gets deferred or delayed in some reason, it's really probably gonna happen. So we like to rely on starts. We've been doing this for 100 years. Here's a kind of a recent picture going back as far as 2005 and 6. Those of you who were in the industry then, things were pretty good. We were coming out of a previous recession. We were almost at a $700 billion industry here in the US across all the different types of projects. Then we had that little thing called the recession. Those of you who lived through that, that was a tough time. I mean, look how much we dropped from getting ready to hit 700 billion down to approaching 400. That's a huge, huge hit in a really short time. That's quite unusual we're a cyclical business, but that was a really, really fast bounce cycle. But you know, since then, we've had a really pretty nice ride coming back. It's been steady, it's been solid, it has paced beyond where we were back in the 05, 06 days, up to where really we're at 856 back in 2019. COVID also kicked us a bit, okay? But it wasn't anything like the recession. And I like to share this just so we keep in mind the big picture that we have here as a cyclical industry. Yes, we dropped almost 10% in terms of starts due to COVID, but we're looking at coming back 4% this year. I think we'll close out this year at 810 billion in starts, and then get back on track, another 8% up next year, heading towards 900 billion, right? So let me break some of this down for you, because we track this in very granular detail by project type and by region all across the country. I'll stick most of the project types today. Residential is a big part of our industry. And as you can see here, it was the thing that was hit hardest of all in the recession. No big surprise, because it was the subprime mortgages that really kicked off that recession. But you can see that kind of dramatic drop from this is in terms of units, 2 million units dropping down to 500,000. I mean, that is just a monster hammer down that we experienced. But that has been coming back slowly. Really wasn't affected by COVID. Big picture, a little bit on the green bars that you see are the multifamily. That being a little bit more commercially driven, that did get pushed down a bit, but the single family really went up 14% that year. And we're looking at pretty good response now, both in this year and next year, up 5 and 8% for single family. still a little bit flattening in the commercial side, but then bouncing up on multifamily next year by 7%. And the thing that's interesting when you break down the entire construction economy is the economic factors in one section can really impact those in another, and it's all very interrelated as a complex ecosystem. And I'll touch on some of those factors that we like to track. In commercial buildings, you can see that got hit pretty hard by the recession, has come back nice and strong, got hit a little harder than some of the other sectors in COVID, right? Because a lot of this has to do with places where people congregate, right? Office buildings, hotels, things like that. I mean, if people aren't getting together anymore, you're going to pull the money from those things, right? You're not going to be starting those kinds of projects. Retail, parking garages, things that were impacted by COVID, they were really felt in the construction and the commercial sector. But we're looking at a 6% bump this year and a 10% bump next year. We're really getting nicely back on track for this sector. But some of the subsectors within it are really interesting to look at in terms of the economic drivers for them. Retail got hit by the recession really hard, began coming back pretty nicely, but it really wasn't COVID that started pushing it down, it was e-commerce, right? I mean, the shift away from people going to stores to buy things and people buying them online had a big impact on brick and mortar retail, right? I mean, look at that as a pounding that sector took. You don't see it so much in the numbers of commercial overall. When you start to pull out some of these subsectors, you really see how they're very influenced by bigger trends in the economy. We're looking at retail itself, actually, despite that, brick and mortar retail actually coming back this year and coming back a bit more next year. Some of this has to do with urban flight and going towards more suburbanization, which was driven by COVID. But this is not as tough a market right now for the next couple of years as it has been. But you look at a little tiny business like warehouses, which back in 05, 06, we're heading towards maybe 13 billion, got whacked by the recession down to about 3 billion. So they're really only represented at that time about not even 10% of the whole commercial sector. But when you look at what e-commerce did to that business, oh my God, look what e-commerce did to warehouse and distribution centers. And in terms of the impact of COVID, laughed it off completely. COVID actually drove more of that business. I mean, this is now going to be like 30% of the whole commercial sector, from almost nothing that many years ago to being a major player in the commercial sector, all due to other bigger economic factors going on in the broader economy that then ripple into our part of the economy in construction. And when you look at who the top owners are, look at where Walmart is compared to Amazon. I mean, Walmart used to be the king. Walmart used to be, in the old days, that's who you look to be building the warehouses. 1.2 billion a year, that is not a shabby program, but it dwarfs compared to 8.8 billion. Actually, this is the last 3 years, but just monster spending by Amazon. And people like C3 Properties, they're down in Atlanta, who support an awful lot of the e-commerce businesses, right? And they'll have properties all over the place so they can do last mile delivery. So all these things end up impacting our business quite directly, quite meaningfully. Then you look at office construction as part of commercial. That, again, got hammered in the recession, came back nice and steady across those 10 years, did again get whacked pretty hard by COVID, because certainly this is a place where people get together. And when you're not having people occupying offices anymore, you're going to pull the plug. You're certainly not going to put more money into new office buildings. But we are looking at an 8% lift and a 10% lift going forward, okay, this year and next year. Now, looking specifically at what we see happening between last year and what we think is going to be the close of this year, this 8% bump is $3.6 billion more in starts. Again, it really helps to kind of peel that onion and see that that's not really all offices in the classic sense, because what we include in that office are data centers. It's 2.1 billion of that is purely data centers, right? So again, this is another trend in the digital economy and the digital transformation of all the businesses out there. Not only is e-commerce driving warehouse and distribution centers, in this office sector, you're seeing data centers being really the strongest driver in that. But again, it's always interesting to peel a little deeper, and that's why we track things at such a micro level, as we can see what these trends are and how they relate to the bigger economy. Institutional buildings, all the education, healthcare. Education is about half of the whole institutional sector, all types, K-12, higher ed, and healthcare is about 20% of this whole sector. The other ones are smaller parts of it. It had a bit of a slower recovery, but still, recovered reasonably well. And we're looking at a 1% lift this year and a 7% lift next year. But again, it's interesting to take that and break it down. You can see where specifically COVID had its biggest kind of negative impact. No surprise, the places where people get together, right? Recreation facilities, any kind of transportation facilities, really hammered, right? Dormitories, down 41% in starts. Religious buildings, down a quarter, right? Big impacts in those places where human beings needed to congregate, and they couldn't because of social distancing and all the impacts of COVID. So that's where you really saw that rear its head. But what we're seeing this year, what we're projecting this year, up 1% overall, and you're seeing some of those coming back. You're seeing, what we're going to see is a pretty good lift in healthcare and a resurgence around a lot of these big airport projects, right, in transportation. And the year after that, some of the other areas popping back pretty strongly. Education, we're projecting is going to be up 6%. The recreation up 8%. Dormitories back up 9% again. So we are getting a recovery throughout institutional. It's spottier, but still, it all makes sense in terms of when you think about what it is in terms of these subcategories, which do get affected, have been affected by the pandemic. And it's natural to see them coming back in a more staggered fashion. The institutional is impacted a lot by state budgets. So a lot of that work gets funded locally, especially you'll see in education. And nobody was planning on having to spend as much as they did on dealing with COVID and out of these state budgets. And so they've been hit pretty hard. The blue is a comparison year over year between 9 months in 2019 and the final 9 months of last year in terms of the impact on these state budgets. A few of those blue states got through okay, a little bit higher, but at best they're neutral. All the gray states and all those tan colors got hit hard, or the dark brown in North Dakota really hard. So this is going to be tough. This is going to have a negative impact. But at the same time, there have been bond issues that were passed as recently as November 2020 around the country. You see a lot of these are places where the population itself has been increasing, and so they're doing bond proposals for education. Manufacturing is the part of the commercial that really got hit the absolute hardest in the recession, because again, you just think about it, it makes sense. The people who make consumer goods, or the people who make things for the people who make consumer goods, they pulled back hard, right? I mean, 1 year drop, right, from 31 billion in starts down to under 10, huge drop, and stayed pretty flat. And the comeback has been choppy. COVID just slammed it again, and we're only looking at maybe a flat year this year and a reasonable uptick next year, but still, this is a sector that has been hit particularly hard by both the recession and by COVID. But again, it makes all the sense in the world because it gets driven by the underlying drivers for why these projects exist in the first place, right? And when the economy pulls the rug out from under you, then you have to pull back. In terms of non-building, any of you who are involved in that, the stimulus bill pulled us across that recession really nicely, okay? So in a sense, it was saved from being really slammed too hard by that. And it stayed pretty strong through the last set of years, and then we're looking actually at a 5% lift this year and a 6% lift next year, and that's without any of this spending bill. Part of it driven by the fact that we're projecting that there will be some sort of a replacement of the FAST Act, right, which was set to expire. And so we believe that even without a stimulus bill, there's going to be some renewal of the FAST Act. And that's going to be several, I'll talk about that in a couple of slides, but you'll see that would by itself has a pretty good lift. So even without the spending bill, we were looking at this being a pretty strong market to be in. When you start to break that down by some of the parts and pieces, you'll see the highways and bridges in 2021 and 2022 up at 2% and 5%, environmental up 6% and 3%, other kinds of non-building up 3% and 5%, power and gas 15% and 9%. And so overall, this is where that's up 5% and up 6% comes from. Each of the sectors has its own story and its own set of drivers. But again, this is without any of this new spending bill at all. We were looking at this being a pretty healthy sector. We do 5-year forecasts as well, and this I pulled this out of our 5-year forecast for highway and bridge. And you can see that span between 2021 and 2026. That was going to be really good business, right? Because we thought that this is when the FAST Act was going to get kicked back in for another 5 years. You see it begins to trail off just a little at the very end because that money would have been spent by then. But we were looking at really solid increases every year in the billions of dollars being spent, both on street and bridge. So how about this infrastructure bill? Those of you who have spent any time taking a look at this, the 2.3 trillion total, about 1 trillion of that is what we might call typically construction in the classic sense. It was meant to be paid for by a big increase in corporate taxes from 21 to 28, but still that's nowhere near the 35 that it was prior to the previous administration doing its tax change. So it's kind of a halfway measure to bring it back, and then some increased taxes on U.S. companies' foreign earnings, which looks like among the G20 that's actually getting a lot of support, so that one actually may happen. The corporate tax rate is going to be a heck of a lot more controversial, unfortunately. And that gets to the reality of actually getting this kind of thing passed in today's environment. You've got slim majorities in the House and the Senate. These pay-fors are likely to alienate any moderates. There is a potential to use budget reconciliation, but the broad scope of this plan makes consensus difficult. There's something for everybody to hate, right? Or there's something that anybody can hate in this thing. So it's tough to imagine it's going to go through just as it is. So there's basically 3 scenarios. Either it does get through just as it is, which we put a very small percentage likelihood to. Nothing at all gets passed, which we really hope doesn't happen, okay? Well, what we think is likely, we're going to get some kind of a smaller bill, and it will have fewer pay-fors, and it will be more focused on the core infrastructure as we might understand it. So here's a breakdown of what we think we're guessing is going to be the likely play here, about $550 billion in spending spread out over that 22 to 25 period. You can see how we're imagining it's probably going to be laid out. Plus, we think that there is going to be that $300 billion for a replacement of the 5-year FAST Act, right? And we had that in our previous forecast. That was what was showing the lift in the next 2 years. So that's still there. We think on top of that, there'll be something around 550 that gets spent, as you see here on the left. So that's going to have a high impact. I mean, the blue bars there on the right were what we were thinking before the even this limited bill. The orange is the impact we think we're going to see once we have this limited infrastructure bill get passed. So on the left there are the categories, which are going to be high, medium, and small impact. So it's going to be big, right? It will be meaningful. It will be felt. There will be a lot of new business coming. But we look back at that stimulus funding happened back in the recession to try and make our guesstimates in terms of how this is going to get spent and by who it's going to get spent by, how much it will be federal, how much of it gets pushed to the states to spend. This was the pattern of spending back in those days, very front-end loaded. So we're thinking it's probably going to be very front-end loaded again. Yes, it may be a multi-year program, but you're going to see a lot of it right away. So this is what we think is going to be happening. On the left here, in terms of the federal spending, would be the jobs plan as it's on the table today. On the right was our old forecast with just the renewed FAST Act. And the center here is what we think we're actually going to see. Again, pretty front-end loaded, beginning to tail off in 24 and 25, actually reducing in 25, back to normal levels, but this is going to be pretty front-end loaded at the federal level. And then in terms of monies that get pushed down to the state and local governments in order to decide about investments, again, we think it's going to be pretty front-end loaded. Okay, the last forecast on the right, the American Jobs Plan on the left, and this is what we think we're actually going to probably see here, much more front-end loaded. So in terms of the non-building value, we think it's going to be actually pretty close to what's in the American Jobs Act. In terms of highway and bridge, it's going to, again, be almost identical to that original spending because that's just core infrastructure that we believe is going to stay almost intact. And you can see the lift between just what the FAST Act would have done on the right and what we think the limited budget bill plus the FAST Act are going to be there in the center. And then in terms of public works, pretty good, right? A lot of that will get through as it is in the plan on the left. And that's a big difference from what we had in the last forecast because the FAST Act is very much transportation based. And then in terms of other non-residential buildings, the numbers will be probably about the same as they are in the Jobs Act, and they're pretty big percentage lifts, but it's a small part overall dollar-wise of the whole package. So, you know, there's still a lot of unknowns surrounding what this is going to look like, but we think that even a limited infrastructure plan, as you've seen, it's going to have a meaningful impact. So let me share with you some other work that we've been doing on the business health of companies in the industry. We do these 2 quarterly reports. And again, these are absolutely free. Please take advantage of those, whichever side or both sides of the industry you happen to be on. These are on construction.com, toolkit reports, put them out every quarter and they're free. One of them takes a deep dive into what's happening with commercial construction companies. The other takes a deep dive into what's happening with civil construction companies, and they have special features about technology or sustainability or workforce or various things that are going on in those 2 markets. You can see the one on the right there was the last issue, which really had a whole lot to do about capturing data in the field to improve processes. But let me show you what some of the things that we've been seeing. Hiring plans, right? Labor is a big issue, okay? And staffing is a big issue. Over the next 6 months, contractor plans, only 12% think they're going to be hiring fewer people. 37% said they'd be hiring more people. When we asked this at the end of last year, Q4 of 2020, you bring it to the first quarter of this year, even more people are going to be hiring, and hardly anybody's going to be reducing, right? So this is how you begin to see what this turnaround in the economy is doing. People are going, I need more people. All right, I got more work coming. I got more work now. I need more human beings. This is a challenge, okay? Because at the same time, 85% said, I have a tough time finding skilled workers, and that jumped up from that Q4 of last year. 88% saying, I can't get people with the skills that I need, all right? And 46% of that was high, which is up 10 points from the end of last year. And 83% said, you know, this isn't going to get better. It's either going to stay the same or it's going to get worse over the next 6 months. So while we do have an influx of new business coming, and with this bill, it's going to be even bigger, we have trouble staffing this work, guys. This is a challenge. 75% say that as a result of this, they're just asking their people to do more work right now. Not a scalable solution, right? But people are doing what they have to do. 61% saying that it's impacting their ability to meet schedules. 59 are actually putting in higher bids. Look, I can't get people. I'm going to go ahead and put in higher bids, right? And this is what's spanning some of this inflation that we're seeing. 34% say, and this is the highest we've seen since we began these reports years ago, 34% of people are turning down work. They just can't do it because they just can't get the people. So what are we going to do when we get this tidal wave of new work coming in? This is going to be tough. Meanwhile, material costs are going up, right? 82% of contractors are saying they've seen material cost fluctuations have had at least moderate to high impact. Wood and lumber got up very high. That has moderated quite a bit, because an awful lot of that was do-it-yourselfers with time on their hands at home and stimulus money, spending money on do-it-yourself projects. That has moderated quite a bit, right? So we're expecting to see the next survey that's come down a bit. But steel is tough. Copper is tough. And shortages, right? Again, wood and lumber, I think from what we're hearing from the mills, they're all working double shifts now in the Southeast, and they're turning out a lot more material. So I think that's going to get better in the next survey, but steel is tough. Pipe and PVC, it's tough. We asked the civil contractors specifically we only asked them this question every 6 months. So between Q3 of last year and Q1 of this year, have you experienced fluctuations on materials costs? And look how that's jumped on the left. And have you seen cost increases? And look how that's jumped on the right. You know, people are really feeling this out there. In the civil side, it's steel, it's concrete, aggregates, electrical. You can see the high level concern is a dark shade, and at least lower moderate is a lighter shade. Again, this is going to have a very real impact on the ability to execute against this big tidal wave of new work that's coming in. And it's the same with equipment, right? The past 6 months on the left, in terms of fluctuations that have impacted their projects, and on the right, scarcity, right? So you got costs on the left, scarcity on the right, increasing, right, between last year and this year. And then the same thing that people are seeing for the next 6 months, costs on the left, scarcity on the right, right? These are very real project problems. In terms of the COVID, that still hasn't gone away. 80% of contractors have experienced some degree of delay, and on average, it's on a quarter of their projects. The top ways that they're dealing with it and the concerns that they have are worker health and safety, which is number one. We're always happy to see that that's on the top of everybody's list, but people are worried about flare-ups shutting down more projects, or that there's going to be fewer projects because of COVID flare-ups again, or there's going to be the less availability of building products, or that they're going to have an even worse time getting workers. So what are people doing? They're adjusting their safety procedures. They're doing more to work remotely. They're looking at contracts which are more able to accommodate the realities of doing work in this new way. A whole lot more increased attention to site and office sanitation, and more remote use of collaboration tools and meeting tools. I think this is going to be a big, big lift in general for an awful lot of tech tools. So we do an index for commercial construction every quarter, and it's a 0 to 100 rating. Most recent report here was in the first quarter of this year. It's running at a 62. It combines new business revenue and backlog to try and give a blended look at how we're doing as an industry. And just for context, it reached its top of 74 right before the pandemic, Q1 of last year. And the immediate quarter after that, it plunged to 56. So it can be very volatile based on what's going on. In 90 days, it dropped that much. So we've come back, you know, a part of the way, 62, okay. Looking at the various pieces, people are relatively confident that they're gonna get the ability to replace the backlog they're burning, all right. In terms of revenue, it's been increasing over the last 3 times we've asked. It gets better and better and better in terms of how many people think they're gonna see a revenue uptick. And the ratio of backlog to ideal, right, is a ratio we ask about every quarter when we do this. You know, and 69 is pretty good. It was 76, of course, in pre-pandemic. That was the highest it reached. And we also look at whether people are planning on putting money into plant and equipment, right, and or into equipment tools, and they are. That has been growing steadily since Q2 of 2020 as the number of people who are planning to actually spend. And this, you know, these are fixed costs. Once you buy stuff, you've spent the money and it's invested. So we look at this as a really key indicator of actual confidence in business going forward. Again, please take advantage of these reports. They're there for all of you. They're a resource. Please check into them. So in summary, yeah, there's some headwinds. Nobody can predict what might happen with the pandemic and flare-ups or different kinds of pandemics. it's pretty clear this won't be the only one we deal with in our lifetimes, right? So it had a pretty ugly impact. Nobody can predict what's going to happen in the future. State and local finances will continue to be tough for the time being. We definitely have gridlock happening at the federal government level, and that's going to impact any kind of spending, especially on the highway bill. And we've got some inflation happening, we've got supply issues, and we've got labor issues, right? But at the same time, there's some pretty great tailwinds. I mean, most of the categories I showed you are looking pretty good between now and 2022. We think that there's going to be a lot of building design improvements that are going to make wellness and safety much safer for people to feel more comfortable about being back in buildings again and resuming life as we're used to. We're going to see, I guarantee you, a great surge in innovative use of technologies to deal with an awful lot of the issues that we have. And there should be a pretty reasonably good-sized impact coming from some kind of a spending bill around infrastructure. We track, as I told you, we track projects when they come in very early, just when they're in the owner stage or early design stage, and that's what we calculate our momentum index from. So it's about a year in advance of a construction start, and you can see how the recession hammered that. COVID pushed it down a bit more, but look where it is now. It's climbing, right? Design firms are getting busier. This is always a really good sign going forward. So just to keep you in touch with what we're also doing on our research side, as I mentioned at the beginning, these are all free reports. Please take advantage of these up on construction.com, toolkit reports. We've got a bunch on technology. We have a bunch on economics and business. There's a lot of them about practice and process. The technology ones is probably the deepest of all these categories. There's ones that we've been doing all over the world about all kinds of technologies. Please, these are all free for you. Take a look at any of these that might be of interest to you. Use them however you want to. Use them in your own presentations. That's what it's for. They're free and they're meant to be shared because they're all sponsored in advance by companies that want us to go out and do this kind of quantitative research to help everybody understand what the big trends are. We've got some going on right now. We're going to be looking deeply into the whole idea of connected construction. How is it that tech is actually being applied on these multi-project performance outcomes, multi-party? We're doing a whole series about going digital. We've got a report out about the digital capabilities of U.S. civil contractors. We're doing a big one right now in 13 different countries about, all right, where are we now that as BIM has been in the marketplace for a couple of decades? What are we actually doing with models? How are we using the data in models? Where are people getting specific, scalable, tangible, repeatable benefits out of it? What are some of the challenges that they're facing? And this is, I think, the first of its kind done comprehensively like this across 13 of the major construction economies in the world. So we'll be able to see where the U.S. compares. I'll give you a little hint. The U.S. is behind, guys. So take a look at this report when it comes out. In some cases, it's actually shocking. You know, we like to think that we're leaders in many ways, but unfortunately, in terms of exactly how we're taking advantage of models and model data, we are lagging in many important ways. We're looking at a lot of different facilities now that are taking advantage of sensors and taking advantage of digital twin and taking advantage of not only being designed and built in more connected ways, but operating in more connected ways. So you get this real seamless design to construction to operations flow. The first one we're looking at, to get back to that point I made about the explosive growth of these distribution warehouse facilities that used to just be, let's face it, a metal box to keep rain off of people's goods. They are now really complex workplaces for thousands of people. They are as sophisticated as airports in terms of operations and highly skilled individuals and tons of transportation coming in and out. Just they've really changed. And so we're going to be doing a deep dive study into that. We're doing, again, a global study in several countries just about what's happening with cost management, right? Because cost is something that has been a problem in this industry, a challenge in this industry to actually deliver for an owner what it is that the board of directors believes that project should cost. We don't have a great track record. And so we're doing a deep dive and to find out exactly how people are using tech to improve cost management. We're doing it in multiple countries, and so that should be worthwhile. And we're also doing a really interesting one about now what's happening with the job site. You know, I've been doing these research reports now for 13 years and looking at lots of different ways tech is being deployed. Certainly with BIM, it began in the office and then moved to the field. I think that the job site right now has got the most innovative and exciting things happening in tech are happening at the job site. And we're working with a company now to look at their own data in terms of the measurable impact that they're having on very specific aspects of job site performance. And then we're going to be doing a survey to sort of test how their findings map to the industry as a whole, and help everybody understand how it is we can get a whole lot better at the job site itself, right? It's such a complex place. Every project's different people working together, different trades working together at different times, materials coming and going, equipment coming and going, right? How can we actually start measuring this at a granular level and get better at it, right? So we're very jazzed about this one. So these will all be coming out later this year. But please keep your eye on construction.com, toolkit reports. Hopefully Annalisa will have me back to share with you some of the findings that we get from these reports. And in terms of these other things, the practice and processes and the economics in business, like I say, we've got those quarterly reports that come out all the time. We're doing another fourth in the series of a deep dive into how people are managing safety. And this time we're looking specifically into how tech is helping. The folks at SmartVid are co-sponsoring this along with CPWR. So we're going to take a deeper dive into how tech and monitoring activities on the site are actually mapping into better safety. And we're also doing our fourth in the series of World Green Building Trends. We benchmark sustainability in over 60 countries, and we're going to be doing that or out in the field with that right now. So again, that'll be coming back. And so anybody who cares about sustainability, you'll have that report soon. Annalisa has had us present that to you all in the past, and hopefully we'll be able to come back and do that again and share our findings with you. So with that, we've got a few minutes remaining here. If any questions have come in, I'm happy to try and field them with you. Again, this is my contact information. Reach out to me at any time. This is all I do all day, and I'm always interested in exchanging information or helping people better understand or getting your thoughts about what things we might want to be looking into and how we can help provide this kind of quantitative research to make us all better. Annalisa, have we had any questions come in?
We do. We do. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Great. Thank you. Yes. And first of all, thank you so much for sharing out such great data. I know a lot of people were interested in hearing how the rest of the year was going. And actually, one of the questions came in was trying to find out more about the regions. I think, I'm not sure if you had shared it earlier in the earlier slides, but maybe you can reiterate more. I guess somebody was asking here if there are any regions particularly doing better, whether that's the Northeast, Pacific Northwest, Midwest. Any insights on how the U.S. section?
As would not surprise any of you, it's a mixed picture based on different markets. Are performing differently in different regions. Dodge has deep dive regional reports available. And so if you want to throw an email to me, I'll put you in touch with the people who are responsible for your region or the regions you're interested in. And they can help you understand a whole lot more about both the forecast and comparing it to recent history for the project types that you're interested in those specific regions. Overall, the general trend is pretty strong everywhere, but there certainly are stronger parts of the country. I did refer at one point to some of the bond issues that you're seeing for education tend to be where population has been migrating to more recently in recent years. But then again, you're going to see different things driving different subsegments of the market in different ways in different parts of the country. It's a complex and interesting, fascinating thing to be studying. So, please tap into us and we can help you however we can.
Sounds great. Thank you, Steve. And somebody else as a follow-up here was just also wondering, since we were talking about the regions, they wanted to find out, are there any particular project types that are doing better than others? Obviously, infrastructure has a lot of funding, but are there any particular building project types that are doing better than others, like hospitality over healthcare?
Yeah, well, I think if the questioner wants to spend a little time again reviewing the recording that you have, I did try and give you the next 2 years of each one of the subsegments that we are, a lot of the subsegments. But again, you know, if you're interested in a deeper dive on that, we do put out twice a year a complete outlook report, and it will go into great depth on every single project type and break it out in as much detail as you could possibly want. It's quite thick and quite comprehensive, and those are available twice a year. We do one in the fall, and we update it. We just updated it recently. So again, toss an email to me. I'll put you in touch with the people who can help you with that, and that will give you an awful lot of the detail that you're looking for.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And also, somebody was like asking, you know, if there were any particular technology that would help them move forward to be more competitive. Obviously, BIM is one of them. You mentioned digital twin, which coincidentally we did an event about it a few weeks back, and I'll be happy to share with the team, you know, the recording for that particular webinar. But any other further insights, Steve?
Yeah, I would make sure that you're looking at reality capture. I think this is one of the next big waves. And you know, the digital twin itself is at a point where, as you will see in the webcast that Annalisa refers to, which she was kind enough to ask me to moderate that. If you ask 100 people what a digital twin is, you get 120 different definitions of it. It's in a sense kind of needing to be mapped very specifically to the end user, right? A digital twin in the mind of the end user is appropriate for his or her specific needs. And then there may be different end users, of course, at any owner organization who's looking for different things out of it. And so this is one of those areas that, should you choose to become very skilled, as the two firms who are on the webinar with us have done, I think that that creates an amazing opportunity for you to establish that as a niche for yourself, differentiate yourself from others who may at the end of a project simply say, well, here's the as-built model. That might be as advanced as you get. Now you're just on your own. But to have planned with the client in advance what they need, getting a little bit more deeply embedded in their operations and maintenance side of their business, and to create an asset, right, a digital asset, that perhaps you can stay engaged with and help them manage going forward. So it keeps that relationship strong, so it isn't just about a project and then you're gone. So I think that this provides a really interesting opportunity to bring full circle the design through construction to operations and actually make it a circle, so that it isn't just linear all the time, linear and goodbye. It's truly a circle, and that you become fully engaged with them as a partner going forward. If you're in construction, both in ongoing work for them and servicing for them, as in design, in terms of optimizing their use and optimizing the operations, I think that this opens up a huge new opportunity around that digital twin. But back to reality capture, you know, we deal with existing conditions, and we deal with existing conditions everywhere we go. New build, renovations, additions. Just think of how many buildings right now need to have work done to them in order to make them safe to reoccupy. That's probably hundreds of millions, if not billions, of square feet. All right, right there is a pressing need, and to be able to capture existing conditions accurately and pull them into a digital environment, and then be able to start to create near-term plans and long-term digital twins, I mean, that is going to be huge. So if you wanted to look at something that maybe isn't getting quite as much attention, or is seen as a niche play right now around reality capture, I think that has a very, very strong future. in the industry. And then I believe, you mentioned BIM. One of the things which you will see if you take a look at this global BIM report that we're doing, that we're not doing as well as others. I think that we've kind of plateaued here in terms of the potential that we're taking advantage of around what the model could be doing or what model data could be doing for us. I think that we are, in some cases, only using it as CAD on steroids to create drawings that go back out in 2D and get used as 2D pieces of content. And I don't think we're not taking as much advantage as other construction economies around the world are at more actively integrating. Some of it has to do with contracts. Some of it has to do with insurance and liability concerns. I get all that, right? But other people are finding their way around that, okay? And I think that that's a big opportunity to be much more thoughtful when you begin a project and you say, are we gonna model this project? Let's look at all the ways that it can be modeled, because that also will allow you to touch what I think is another big area that's in its early days, is prefabrication and modularization. And I think people have a kind of a preconceived idea or prefab. Okay, yeah, all right, MEP, yeah, maybe some electrical. Okay, yeah, I get it. And we are just scratching the surface of industrialized construction. Again, it's an opportunity to not have to chase that once it's already become better established, but to see if you can't get your head around it, what the opportunities might be for the kinds of building types that you do. And if you're on the construction side, trust me, there are people who are really seriously investing in this. The DPRs and the JE Dunns of this world are really seriously investing in this. And just because Katera blew up doesn't mean that modular is not still an important thing to do. There is on our site, on the construction.com toolkit reports, a report we did last year with a pretty deep dive into prefab and modular. But the degree to which we can tie digital design and construction into a much more active use of industrialized construction, and I don't mean robots on the site as much as I mean high quality manufactured elements of the buildings and the civil assets that we create, I think that is an almost untapped area, which again is going to be an incredibly powerful competitive advantage for you, because it's not the kind of thing somebody can pick up over a weekend, right? I mean, if you actually do some of this work and can point to it, and you have happy owners as a result of that, that's going to be a very powerful competitive advantage for you.
Thank you, Steve. That was a lot. And I also, while you were talking, to share the link for the modular and prefab report that you did. Okay, and I know there's a lot of information that's coming at you. A question like that probably needs another hour to discuss. And as Steve had said, he had done a numerous amount of webinars with us in the past. We're always at the forefront every time Dodge Data and Analytics is doing another report. So we'd love to obviously invite you again in the future, Steve, when we have other events or other reports. I just have another quick question here from Bart. He was asking, inflation has been a big concern, and now recent reports on lumber prices coming down has suggested this moderates the concern. Could you comment on your thoughts about inflation, where it will go, and the impact it will have on the construction budgets?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. The Fed has a lot to do with that. The Fed is continuing its quantitative easing program. The Fed is not looking at like it's going to be pumping rates up anytime this year. It might be into next year. I think in a sense it's a little bit artificially controlling inflation, but it's controlling inflation, okay? Keeping a leash on the dog, if you will, even though the dog might want to run. The thing I worry about the most is the cost of labor. We still have high cost of labor as a percentage of the cost of construction, and the shortages. There's no way around that this is going to increase both the cost of labor and the scarcity of labor is going to push up prices. You saw how many people are putting in higher bids now because either they don't have the labor and they have to be smarter about the resources that they have, or if they get additional labor, they'll probably have to pay more for it, right? That's the aspect I'm most concerned about. Now, can tech help us? Oh yeah, right? Can a more thoughtful application of tech reduce the need for labor? Yes, it absolutely can, because it can allow any individual to do more, be more productive than they were. And I think that's what I'd like to see us focus on, as opposed to hoping that the Fed saves us. Can we save ourselves by being a whole lot more productive by the active and intentional and thoughtful use of tech, right, to make sure we're making the most of the resources that we have, right? If we can reduce rework, right there is a huge savings in terms of resource allocation. If we can increase productivity, that's a huge positive impact on resource use and allocation, right? Things like that, we have the control over. And I think that it's within our power to be able to take advantage of that. And the kinds of numbers that I'm seeing with prefab, for instance, where it would take 15 tradespeople to do a certain scope of work on site, can be done with 2 in a factory, right? And believe me, those 15 on the site are not going to be put out of business. Trust me, not. They got plenty of work for them to do, right? But if we can begin to be more thoughtful about this whole process and not just keep doing what we used to do, right? But how can we use tech and how can we use the sorts of industrialized processes available to us now to be way more thoughtful about resource use and resource allocation? That's going to help control inflation. It's also going to improve safety. It's also going to improve schedule compliance. It's also going to improve budget compliance and all the other things which owners are looking for.
Sounds great. Thanks for that insight. We only have a couple more minutes left, but I wanted to take this question from Andrew. He's asking, given the impact that the construction industry has on our global carbon emissions, has Dodge Data and Analytics considered tracking the carbon footprint alongside the cost value of construction starts? Which leads up to your next report.
That does. That leads up to our World Green. The U.S. or the World Green Building Council is our main partner, along with the U.S. Green Building Council, and then that gets us all the green building councils around the world as our partners. But Autodesk is also a partner on this, and they brought to the table a very high concern about carbon. So there will be a lot more focus on controlling carbon in this particular report, and it is something that we're also particularly interested in. I personally believe that a carbon tax may be the smartest thing we could possibly do, as opposed to trying to control from the top. Let's control from the bottom. Let's control at the source. But right now, it would be difficult for us if we're tracking buildings as they're being built to actually be able to predict, the carbon impact of a particular building. So we have to do this kind of thing through surveys to ask people who are more knowledgeable about the projects that they're actually doing in terms of what they're doing to reduce carbon impact. And that's about the most we can do right now, because there isn't really a way to score a building in the abstract, if you will, for its carbon impact while it's being designed and built in any kind of scalable way. It ends up being anecdotal, or else we have to collect it through surveys across broad numbers of people. So that's the best we can do for all of us right now.
That's great, and thank you so much. And also, I was going to type in the World Green Building Trends report. I'm just curious to find out, Steve, you would know better. Is the 2018 one the most recent one you've done?
That's the most recent one. We're in the field now with the 2021 one. So if anybody wants to see an older one, you can certainly make that available. But the new one should be out in this fall. And as I say, it's got a lot more of a focus on carbon.